The views, information, or opinions expressed in this episode are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the University of Hawaii, College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resilience, our funders, or any of the organizations affiliated with this project. Welcome to a Seeds of Wellbeing Experts in the Field podcast featuring Hawaii agriculture producers and affiliates working in their field of expertise to support agriculture in Hawaii, in the United States, and in some cases around the world. These podcasts are made possible by a grant from the University of Hawaii College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resilience, also known as CTAHR, and the Seeds of Wellbeing or SOW project, and is supported by a grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and the Hawaii Department of Agriculture. Aloha! Thanks for being willing to be recorded for Seeds of Wellbeing podcast. Here with Susan and from Bird and Bee in Honolulu on the Big Island.
You always want to be aware of anything that looks off in your hive.
They don't mind being knocked off that way, huh?
No, it's easier for them than being smoked or brushed off.
All these farmers are losing their shirts because they're not able to export like they used to also. And then on top of it, when we have emergencies like we're having right now with the colony collapse disorder, we don't have scientists looking into why it's happening and then to stop it. So we're in kind of free fall with beekeeping in the United States right now.
Okay, with no net, and the net being pulled away.
Right.
In this episode, we speak with Susan Collins, owner of Bird and Bee Hawai on the Big Island of Hawaii. As you will hear, Susan has gone to great lengths to educate folks about bees, beekeeping, and legislation related to beekeeping in Hawaii. We talked about how she got here, where things are going, and then heard a very recent update related to recent colony collapse on the mainland and the impact of government cutbacks, DOGE, and the spending freezes implemented by the Trump administration. So Susan, tell us a little bit about your background, your Hawaii story, as sometimes we call it, how you got here and why, and Bird and Bee Hawaii and how that started, and give us a little background if you would, please.
Sure. So I grew up on a farm actually in New Jersey, and it was a pretty rural area, so I spent a lot of time taking care of animals when I was growing up. I went through the United States, living in 9 different states, different points, and I came to Hawaii as a librarian. I worked as a librarian for a few years and also as a teacher. I have a background, I have a master's in education as well as library and information science. And as life kind of progressed, I really wanted to stay at home and farm more, and I was always trying to think about that and figure it out in the back of my mind. And during COVID, I started a small business around my beekeeping just because I noticed there's no bee supply store or place to get bee supplies in Hawaii at my house. So I started just with a pallet at a time, selling to friends or a few people I knew. And during COVID, everything kind of got turned upside down, and I was able to think more out of the box and also take a lot of online trainings on creating a business. And around that time, I started teaching courses. So I have a 4-part course that I teach. And around that time, I also started writing grants for my business. So that's how I had this building built, and that's how I kind of started growing, is through grant writing, SBA, short-term loans for small businesses, things like that. And one thing led to another, and all of a sudden I was a full-time beekeeper with 4 different incomes. So I teach a 4-part beekeeping course. I give a 2-hour tour to visitors to the Big Island. So half the time, actually, they are from Hawaii, and they are just being inquisitive. And then the other half are tourists from other places, other countries, or the mainland United States. I also sell bee equipment, and I do removals from people's homes.
4-part course. Is that something you designed and came up with, or was that inspired by someone else?
It was inspired by a mentor of mine, Richard Spiegel, and he taught this 4-part course, I think even 20 years ago or something like that. And he saw how much I wanted information, and he said, you know what, I've been taught this in about 10 years, but let's put this 4-part course together. You just get the people. So I put it together. I advertised for it and brought 12 people together for this course, and it was at his house, which is down the road from here. And then I wanted to do it again. People wanted more. More people wanted this course, and he wasn't really interested for different reasons. So I thought, well, I'm an educator. I can kind of put something together, and I put together my own designed course, inspired by what he taught, but also different kind of format. So more hands-on. I think the hands-on approach is very important to beekeeping. I don't think that everything can be learned from just online. There's a lot of information out there. It becomes very confusing. And Hawaii beekeeping is very different because we get to keep bees year-round. In most places in the world, you don't.
So kind of like we find in agriculture, where don't believe what you see on YouTube necessarily, because it may not work here.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So COVID. So it was one of the benefits, I guess, of COVID for you was evolution, or the creation or solidification, perhaps, of Bird and Bee Hawai.
Definitely.
Yes. What are, I'll put links in the show notes so that folks can find your website. And what inspired the name?
I always had that name in my mind.
Yeah, just materialized.
Because I have lots of birds.
You do? Of all different types?
Yeah, guinea hens and ducks and peacocks and chickens, and a lot of people don't necessarily have that also. I don't sell a lot of them, but they're here and they're definitely part of the landscape of my 5-acre property.
So tell us what your plans are for Bird and Bee Hawai for the future.
That's a really good question. I'd like to know too.
See what presents itself?
Yes. I all 4 streams of what I've kind of formulated for my business are equally as important to me. So I sometimes think I want to focus on 2-hour bee tours and promoting that more to visitors, but then I really love teaching the 4-part course. I think it's really important because many people will just get bees here, put them in a box, and then not know what to do next, lose their bees, and then they contact me, and in the process lose hundreds of dollars
or more.
And I think it's reality. And also a lot of people go online to get their bee equipment, and a lot of it doesn't work out very well for them, and they don't know why.
And from what I understand, it sounds like there's a pretty high failure rate for beekeeping for that first year, especially in general. Is that true? Yeah,
I read somewhere 80%, which I could see. If people have a couple bad encounters or situations, they're not interested anymore because it just seems too hard. And usually that's just the norm when you first start beekeeping, because there's so much that can go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So educating oneself sounds like it's key to success.
Yes.
And both initially and ongoing as well?
I think so. I go to beekeeping conferences on the mainland. We don't have any here in Hawaii. And that's where I've learned the most and become a better beekeeper, is by going to these conferences and learning from speakers and research that's going on in other places in the world. There are a few other people in Hawaii that I kind of see as a mentor, and I've learned a lot from. But Hawaii can become very insular very quickly, I think, and especially on the Big Islands. And I think it's important to go out and learn from what other people are doing in the world.
Nice. So, fail to plan and plan to fail. Is that the adage? sounds like it applies to beekeeping as well.
Yeah, and keeping insects is very different than keeping mammals or keeping plants. And just because honeybees go along with pollination, people assume that it'll just be an easy one because they already are planting something and they already have chickens or something, but it's totally different.
Okay. So there's over the years there's been news about bees, right? About more recently about the critical function of bees in pollinating in our food system. I think we've heard about killer bees and panics about killer bees for windows of time. We've heard about the death of bees around the world. So we've heard a lot of, those tend to be the stories that I think make it to the general population. So just I think the oldest of those maybe is the death of bees, large scale death of bees. Is that related to, do you have a sense of what that's related to, or could share?
Well, they call it colony collapse disorder, and it's a culmination of everything. It's a culmination of loss of habitat, of pesticides and herbicides, of pollution, of what's just being put in the environment. They found it actually affects the gut of the bee, so it makes them more prone to disease and to death, just because they're not as healthy because of all these different situations. And also being moved around. Bees don't really like being moved around, so it really varies according to what kind of beekeeper you are and how many hives you have, I think. Yeah.
It sounds like that's a big business in California, especially, for example, is moving hives to a location where it's needed.
Yeah, the whole state, the whole United States, rather. I know someone who's he has like 8,000 hives, and he lives in New York State, and they go all around the United States, including California, and come back to New York State once a year. So what we do in Hawaii is totally different because we don't have that. We have a little bit of pollination. There's some mac nut growers that understand the importance of pollination on their crops, things like that, but we don't have the large scale agriculture that you find on the mainland.
Do we have killer bees?
We do not have killer bees, knock on wood. Yeah, a lot of it, when you see it in the news, is used to politicize different issues. These people are bringing over Africanized bee genes somehow, or
I think there's politics certainly related to beekeeping. I know there's some laws or statutes on the Big Island of Hawaii, for example, that people are talking about trying to change related to bees. Do you want to talk to any of that?
So right now it's Bill 144, and it's just a zoning law. Some people, or bill for just the county of Hawaii, and people are getting very confused, and they think it's they want to put all these other things in the bill, but it's just changing zoning. That's it. And basically, bees are considered the same as some kind of different types of livestock, including pigs. So there's 1,000 foot from any main road law right now on them, as well as 75 feet from a property line. But if you have bees, you know that they like to cruise around 15 or 20 feet off the ground. So as soon as they come out of their hive, they come up, and they prefer to actually forage in trees that are blooming than plants down below. So right now we're trying to change that law or that county rule to no zoning. So right now you have to have agricultural land. Most beekeepers do not, I'd say. You have to be 1,000 feet. Well, you're supposed to be 1,000 feet from a main road, which could be a dirt road. And I think the majority of beekeepers cannot follow that rule just because of the way development on the Big Island works. I know someone with 3 acres and they have a spaghetti lot, and they can't even follow the 75 foot away from a boundary line rule, but they have 3 acres. And bees are really important for pollination of all kinds of things, and all this talk of self-sustainability on the Big Island. We need pollinators to do that, to create more food. So if we want to create more food, we have to support the pollinators. So yeah, and we're just basically updating standards that are pretty typical of the rest of the United States. There's bee associations that are in San Francisco and New York City, and people keep bees all kinds of places on top of apartment buildings. I met someone that actually has their bees in their apartment in New York City. And they find those bees are oftentimes healthier because the variety of different trees and plants that are found in the parks, the different parks and the botanical gardens that you can't find anywhere else, almost all year round. So they're actually healthier bees. A lot of the bees in the farmlands are maybe able to collect from only a dozen different varieties of plants and trees, and they bloom at certain times of the year, and then there's no blossoms. So they need that forage. Yeah.
Do you think that there need to be more beekeepers in Hawaii?
I don't necessarily think there needs to be more beekeepers, but becoming more aware of honeybees, I think, is really important. That's not part of school curriculum usually. So a lot of people grow up with Hollywoodization of beekeeping. Like the movie The Beekeeper, I couldn't even finish watching the first 20 minutes because he goes in and he's removing a beehive, but actually it's a wasp nest, and he's wearing like a fencing jacket to remove the bees, and I'm just so there's
so if you were to create a curriculum edition for school systems, what would be on it?
Just general information of what honeybees do and what they're important for, and the life cycle. I think the life cycle is really important. People don't really understand insects, I think, including myself. Before I started beekeeping, it's just like, cool, there's an insect, but there's definitely a whole life cycle that goes on, and different situations that make them healthier or not as healthy. And just as a landowner or as a voter, understanding what's being sprayed in the environment, or who's supporting what, and why it's important to know about those things, I think is really important.
Do you think there's an aspect of beekeeping that is helpful for your mental health, or for mental health in general for beekeepers?
Well, it's interesting when I see people go in the hive, anything they're thinking about, they suddenly drop, and they have to be present in the hive. You can't be thinking about, oh, I gotta go pay my taxes, I gotta go pick up the kids, or whatever it is. You have to kind of put that to the side when you're in the hive. So I'd say it's an active meditation in a way. You can't think about anything else. And we do have whole farms come with a group once a year, and
a program out of Hilo.
Yes, and that's very very beneficial for the veterans that are in the group, and they're also supporting them in their agricultural pursuits. But it's all about going back to mental health and being whole and happy.
So if I'm not keeping bees, are there ways that I can help with the aspects related to beekeeping and its importance?
I'd say support your local beekeeper. So buy local honey from your beekeeper instead of going to Costco and buying the honey from Brazil. I just saw that the other day. I'm like, why do they have this honey? But you get 3 bears of honey for $15, and a local beekeeper will sell you the 1 bear for $15. So people want a good deal. But if we're going to support local agriculture, we have to start with where we're buying things. So I think that's a main one. And then also being aware of how and where pesticides and herbicides are being sprayed in the county. I think that's a big one. We still have not banned 20 different pesticides and herbicides that really are not needed that have been banned on Kauai.
I did see a no spray sign at your gate. with the bee on it.
Yeah. So you have to, in the county of Hawaii, you have to fill out a form online, which is really hard to find. And then you also are required to put out a no spray sign, even if you fill out the form. And I think on this street, there's enough people that have filled out that form that I don't even see any spraying lately, which is great. It used to be really bad.
So for the sake of the bees, should you feel like we should all fill out those forms and put up those signs?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's 10 feet. And on my property, it's a little harder in the front because it goes down like that. There's no flat area really. Yes.
You just take care of that yourself.
Yes. And sometimes the county comes along with their mower and it can't kind of fit because it is so steep right there. So I just come along with a weed whacker every couple months. Cut it back. And all of those weeds are really great forage for the bees. So that's the other reason I have no spray.
No additional benefits. Nice. We then spent some time looking into the hives on Susan's property. So here we are at the hive. What should we be thinking about as we approach the hive?
You're letting them know you're here. So I smoked the front a little bit just to let them know I'm coming. And so I'm always just aware of what I'm looking at. Like it's been rainy a lot, so I'm noticing the edges are a little bit damp, and I may or may not replace this box if it's too damp. I've been replacing a lot of boxes lately because it's been so rainy.
You're mentioning pests are a big problem, mites in particular?
Yes, varroa mites, they're huge. They carry diseases, and they also latch on to the underside of bees, and they shorten the bee's lifespan, basically.
How do you treat for those?
There's a lot of different treatments on the market. I use Apivar, which are basically just small plastic strips that are infused with amitraz, and then you leave them on for about 40 days, and it kills most of the mites, knocks them back, and then that's it. And then your populations start taking off when your bees are healthy.
Is there any debate about spraying or using those chemicals with bees?
There is, and that's why there's lots of different options. I like amitraz. It's not considered organic, but it's easy on the bees. It's stable in all different types of conditions. So some of these, I'm just checking to see what's going on in this frame. Some of these treatments are considered organic, but they aren't as effective, and they're also they're not stable in different types of heat. So in Hawaii, we can go up into the 80s, and some of the treatments will actually kill your bees if it goes up to 80 degrees with the treatment on, and Apivar doesn't do that. It's really depressing to watch your bees die. So even if you think you're doing good for your bees, that's why I choose that treatment. But there's other treatments on the market. There's oxalic acid, which is nice to keep levels at a constant, but it doesn't necessarily knock all your pests back. So sometimes people will use the Apivar or amitraz and then use oxalic acid as kind of maintenance throughout the year. And I'm always looking for the queen. The last time I was in here, the queen looked a little rough. And I'm not sure if it's because of the robber bees. Lately I've been having a problem with other bees going in and trying to rob while I have the hives open. and it's very annoying because they'll go in and try to kill the queen while they're robbing. And I'm not seeing any eggs on this frame, but I'm seeing lots of catch brood, which is nice. So I really like this hive because they're very quiet on the frame, generally speaking. I mean, there's a few flying around, but they're not upset that I'm in the hive with them.
When you look very unafraid, so are there any reasons to be afraid? When should one be afraid when they are approaching bees or beehives?
Well, my bees in general, I try to keep hives that are pretty calm. There are some swarms that I'll bring home and they'll have wild genetics in them, and those are the hives I don't take new students into. But I'm not afraid of them. I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep a nice, healthy colony. Let's see what's happening. And yeah, this is what I was afraid of. So yeah, something happened with that queen. So on this side, see all the peanuts?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they're replacing their queen. Which is fine. I liked her. It's too bad that happened.
They're staging a coup.
Well, I think she perished.
She did.
Yeah, she looked a little rough when I put her back in.
I think that's kind of one of the many interesting things about bees, and how they not only can they pick the gender of the bee that's born, but when they see a queen needs to be replaced or it's time,
Yes.
then they create their own.
Yes, exactly. Yep. And then there's a bunch of cells on this frame too. So what I'm thinking as I'm going through here is I have a hive that is queenless, and I think I'll take one of these frames and introduce it to them so they can hatch those eggs or hatch those queen cells like their own.
One of the benefits to having many hives.
Yes, definitely. And that's why I always recommend people get at least 2 or 3 hives when they first start. Yeah, there aren't any eggs or anything. That's too bad.
That's why you inspect them.
Yeah, exactly. And also, when this is called a brood break. So basically, there's a hive beetle. When there's a brood break going on, that's also a chance for them to get rid of a bunch of mites, because the mites need new brood to survive. That's part of the life cycle of the mite. And when they don't have that brood, then they start to die off, or they can't reproduce anymore. So that's also going on. That's the benefit of not having a queen for a moment.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you so much. I'll leave you to finishing your work with your bees.
Okay.
And appreciate all your time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Any kind of words of wisdom, advice, thoughts you would want to share with Hawaii egg producers?
We don't all have to be beekeepers. And if you are interested in beekeeping, I encourage you to take some kind of course or class, not a 2-hour class, something longer, to really understand how to keep bees and what's involved before investing in hundreds of dollars in equipment and bees, and realize, weighing out how much time you actually have for them.
Yes, it's like getting a pet is times 10, maybe.
Yes.
Don't do it casually.
And most people cannot come over and just get your bees if you're off island or something because you have a swarm. You have to
make it a bee walker.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Nice. Yeah. Do your neighbors give you any trouble related to the bees, or do you feel like they understand, or do you have to educate them? Or?
No, most of my neighbors we're pretty far apart, and what I hear mostly is, "Oh, I see your bees on my trees all the time," and they like that because in this area it's an agricultural area. I do have I have a few neighbors that host commercial beekeepers, so they have like 40 to 80 hives sitting on their property, and then they get tax write-offs. Although that sounds like it might change. I don't know what's happening with that.
Yeah, speaking of politics, our county, new zoning laws are happening here on the island in the next couple of years.
Yes.
Related to ag zoning, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. And because there were some significant changes to the political landscape since Susan and I first met, I caught up with Susan in April of 2025 to review some of those changes. I've been in the process of editing your podcast, and I realized when we spoke last, a lot of what we talked about was related to zoning laws and some of the setback requirements for bees that was in process in legislation in Hawaii, and what that impact might be if it weren't passed. So now this is a number of months later, and that law has passed, and I think it was as you had hoped. It passed in ways that you'd hoped it had passed.
It used to, the county law used to say if you had bees, it had to be 1,000 feet from any main road, and that could include a dirt road, which really was very difficult unless you had a large tract of land. So for example, I have 5 acres, and it was really hard to say my bees were 1,000 feet from any main road, even on 5 acres. So now it's 25 feet from any main road, which I think is great. And also you don't have to have agricultural land. So it's open to any type of property on the Big Island. And it's probably one of the, if you look at the other counties, it's the most progressive in Hawaii, which I'm really happy about. And then the only restrictions that they have is if you have a half an acre or less, you can only have 15 hives, which is a lot for a half an acre. But they did that because there's a lot of property, especially in the southern part of the island, that they'll have a half acre lot, and then no one else will be around them. So it makes sense for them if they're, especially if they're next to, national park land or an uninhabited area. So that's the only restriction other than 25 feet from a property line, or 15 feet if you have a 6-foot barrier. So that makes the bees go up and over. So that's the update.
That's great to hear that passed, and it sounds like all you wanted and more, maybe.
And it's to the credit of the council members right now. So they are doing a really great job. I'd say pretty much all of the council members that I've been seeing when I go to the meetings, they really care about the county, and they're really trying to make change for the good. Changes that this new law, this county law has created is now more people are interested in beekeeping for sure, because now they know they can do it legally. So that's the big change. And also because of the new property tax laws that are going into effect, it's kind of a big deal for people that that want to get ag status on their property, but don't necessarily want a cow or, chickens, or going to be making microgreens or something like that. And they're looking for something that they can interact with and then have on their property. Right now, I feel like that is kind of in flux as to how many hives per acre would be required. And I don't think that's really been pinpointed yet by the county. I think the more that they learn in June, when I do a training with some of their staff, that'll change.
Yeah, and just to touch on that a little bit more. So Hawaii County has changed all the ag zoning, and that I think it takes effect next year. And people have this window where they can submit their applications for to renew their ag zoning or get their ag zoning by, I think it's the end of September of 2025.
Right.
And so it's got a lot of people concerned in ag because there's generations upon generations of people that have had ag zoning, and it's just always been there, and it really reduces the property taxes because they have the ag land and ag zoning. And now it's a bit concerning for people that not because the laws are a little fuzzy and, as you said, a little bit in flux. It seems like there's been some changes and some more changes, and there's new categories now, and it's certainly become much more complex for folks that want to have ag zoning on the Big Island. So we hope Seeds of Wellbeing hopes to do a podcast on that topic and drill down a little bit more with the county. But that's
Well,
kind of, it sounds like you're seeing an impact on beekeeping.
Yeah, definitely. But I also, when I speak with people about beekeeping, it's really important for them to know that they need to have some kind of training um, before they get into beekeeping, because the majority of people that just tried it by themselves, they fail and they lose hundreds of dollars in equipment and bees. And also it causes problems with their neighbors because their bees are swarming. And then there's a lot more work to it than people realize, I think. But that being said, there are, like, my neighbor who says he has an orchard and his property is not an orchard, it's all grass. I think there are reasons for the changes. So.
Yeah, and I think it's to crack down on the folks that have had ag zoning and have mansions and grass and a goat, right?
Right.
And I think everyone wants it to be fair and legitimate, I think, but it's a little disconcerting, right? If you've never had to go through the process and you've had your ag zoning and you feel like you've been doing the right thing, but now it's like, what category do I fit in? But you think, and it sounds like you're doing a training in June of this year for the county so that they kind of understand what to look for.
Yes.
Speaking of government and government potentially causing drama and upheaval in agriculture, we're a few months, I think 90 days maybe or less into President Trump's second term, and it's been a bit chaotic. A lot of changes, a lot of quick changes, a lot of new departments being created and old departments being disbanded. So I think everyone's a bit nervous, I think, in ag, and especially if funding and grant funding has been a key source of revenue for a lot of people. I think most of the ag programs I can think of need and benefit or potentially even require government funding in order to exist and continue. And the government has frozen most, or if not all, of those funds. And in some cases have withdrawn those funds. So DOGE is, Department of Government Efficiency, which is currently headed by Elon Musk, has been appointed to do that, is kind of going in and freezing things and dismantling things. So, I mean, I'll call it chaos. With all the chaos going on, what do you see as the impact to the ag community and the ways that you touch it?
Well, I'm on a board, a national beekeeping board. And just from my own perspective, I'm not representing them at all. Is we're also unfortunately having 70 to 80% colony loss on the mainland, not in Hawaii. And that is going to impact our food production for the next few years, for the foreseeable future. And a lot of these beekeepers were just hanging on as it is because the costs are so high compared to what they actually make. So once you lose most of your bees or pretty much all of your business in one fell swoop in 1 month, then it's really hard to get back on your feet. And right now, all those safeguards for farmers have been taken away. And I hear people saying, oh, well, we got to get the government to do something. But the fact is they are dismantling the safeguards that we have in place for these situations. So that's a huge issue. That's a food security issue. And on the uppermost level. And all they're talking about is creating more income or more revenue for the United States and bringing jobs back here, but they're actually cutting all these jobs. All these farmers are losing their shirts because they're not able to export like they used to also. And then on top of it, when we have emergencies like we're having right now with the colony collapse disorder, we don't have scientists looking into why it's happening and then to stop it. So we're in kind of free fall with beekeeping in the United States right now.
Okay, with no net, and the net being pulled away.
Right.
Yeah. So it's probably the worst time for colony collapse. Has there been colony collapse for a while or on and off over the years?
It's on and off, but 20 years ago was the other acute kind of situation. And I have no idea why this event is happening. I mean, pretty much if you look at all the different pressures that we put on bees in general, that probably will be your answer. But they're still doing research as to why this is happening across the United States.
We thank Susan for sharing her mana'o and details about bees and related legislation and training in Hawaii. With a large percentage of our food reliant upon pollinators like bees for our food production, the steady and sometimes dramatic decline in bee populations across the world, combined with the U.S. government freezing and cutting funds related to beekeeping and bee health, this is a timely topic. What can you do, right, is where we all feel a little concerned or helpless, unless we feel like there's something we can do. So it seems like getting your voice heard, your legislators, I know there's demonstrations that are happening. So I think getting involved it's probably more important now than ever. So.
Which brings me to World Bee Day, which is May 17th. And it'll be the third annual World Bee Day. It's an event, it's World Bee Day Hawaii. So it's an event based on the UN proclamation of May 20th being the International Day for Pollinators, because pollinators are so important to our food systems and sustainability. And what I'm trying to do with World Bee Day is create a community, a networking opportunity. Also, I'm bringing in people from the mainland, from ABF and the University of Colorado to teach about, we're doing a microscopy session where we're actually looking at different parts of the bee to understand honeybees better. And then also learning how to market products better in a farmer's market, and also to upscale your apiary.
Okay, and it's Hawaii Island, but it's being held on the Big Island of Hawaii in Hilo, is that correct?
Yes.
Are folks from all the islands invited?
Yes, anybody.
Great.
Anybody is invited.
Anybody from anywhere?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's free. There's mead making sessions. There's vendors from different apiaries there. There's nonprofits. There's a honey tasting. There's free hands-on kind of projects for anybody, making bee hats and making rolled candles and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun for everyone.
Yes.
Whether you've ever been near a bee or not.
And there's an after mead party 4 to 5:30.
Ooh,
so,
nice.
Yeah.
That sounds fun. So sounds like a couple of key points. One is there's laws changing locally in Hawaii, and so pay attention to that and don't jump into beekeeping without training, because it can get expensive and you could anger your neighbors and maybe worse.
You could spend a lot of money and then lose it all just because you're not understanding how to keep bees, or even you're not sure if you even want to actually do it. I think people have an idea of what it will be like, and then they actually do it and they're like, maybe not.
Yes, and as we can see in some of the videos, you get a better sense of it, I think, of what's really involved. The video I took at your farm. And last but not least is bee collapse on the mainland, drama in politics and funding as a result, and get political and try to help save the bees.
The intention of these podcast series is to create a safe space for respectful and inclusive dialogue with people from across a broad and diverse spectrum involved in growing and making accessible the food we share together. A diversity of voices, perspectives, and experiences can serve to deepen mutual understanding, to spark creative problem solving, and provide insight into the complexities of our agricultural system. If you, our listeners, have experiences with Hawaii agriculture ecosystem, from indigenous methods, permaculture, smallholder farmers, to large, including multinational agricultural industrial companies, and everywhere in between, and you would like to share your story, please contact us. We welcome your voices and perspectives.